Alright, start the bitch up.
That guy is kind of over-enthusiastic about a lot of things.
Enthusiastic about awesomeness.
Is he
Oh,
on?
the audio is probably fine. Alright, I'll listen next to Sterling.
Yeah, it's
Cool.
freezing over here.
Alright, 6:30, half an hour late. Oh, Jesus.
That's a beginning.
Oh,
That's one more thing that I have done after.
it was coming in on the other thing.
It was like you from.
Alright, let me re-kill that. There's no Danny B to sing our theme song.
Oh no.
Alright, we're just get the show started. Hey Internet, it's TIGRadio number 22.
I guess.
I don't actually know. Let me go look real quick, so I know what to name it.
Oh, this is
We're done.
critical. We can't start this without
It's
that.
very critical. So we're here at Evo, which is, so who wants to describe Evo? Because I am actually not super
How about
familiar.
our live guest, David Serlin, describe Evo?
Yeah, so so let me show you who we're here with in our disorganized fashion. Kyle Pulver, Andy Nealon, Adam Saltzman, Corey Nolan's over there. Our special guest of the evening is David Serlin. So David, do you want to just describe Evo to?
Yeah, so we're here at the Evolution Fighting Game Championships, which is the largest fighting game tournament in the United States, and there's people from all over the world here. I don't know how many countries are represented this year, but in previous years we've had 30 different countries, and there's, I'd estimate at least a couple thousand people here.
I think it was 2,000 to 3,000 registered players.
Yeah, so it's a huge event, and there's 6 different official games, fighting games played here, as well as some side tournaments for other games.
And documentaries starring a 10 years younger David Serlin.
Yeah, bang the machine.
So I'm actually not. I probably played 10 hours or less of fighting games, but what fascinates me about Evo is the fact that it's like the best players in the world are here, and the level of competition is insane. So even if I'm not kind of aware of how difficult it was to do whatever FADC kind of move, or is it FACD? Dash cancel DC. I don't know. So like, what's your take on the level of competition this year? Is it higher than previous years? Lower? Do you think it's reaching a plateau, or do you think it'll keep getting crazier?
Well, it could be different for each game. Like Tatsunoko is a new game, and
Yeah.
I don't really know. I mean, I honestly have no idea like how seriously that's played or what the community's doing in that game. So I don't know. For all I know, that it could be kind of a low bar relatively.
Mhm.
I hope no one out there is angry. But like
TVC
Issue
fans.
Remix, which we just were at the finals of, it's like super high. I mean, it's based on the game Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, or ST,
Yeah.
and that goes back 14, 15 years now. So that it's the knowledge about that engine and how it works.
How did you fare in the remix tournament?
Well, I've got top 8 for 3 years in a row, and then this year I made the semifinals and lost. Lost to Choi though. Choi's one of the best players in the country.
You don't feel bad about that.
And
Do you-
breaks.
Do you feel like you have an advantage because you have seen under the hood of the game, or do you feel like it doesn't really apply when you're in the moment?
I think it matters surprisingly little, actually. Like, I mean, I do have a lot of knowledge of. I mean, even before I worked in the game, I had a lot of knowledge about it. And now I have even more, but I don't think it's really about that. So,
Yeah, it's more about.
I mean, knowing like exactly what they're going to do and having the execution skill to do the reversal at the right time.
Yeah.
Having developed the right reactions to things, like you
Mhm.
almost think of it like martial arts. When
Yeah.
someone does a certain thing, you just have to like automatically somehow know to do some other
Yeah,
thing.
it feels less like reflexes in the sense of like targets popping up and you shoot them reflexes, and more like kind of muscle memory reflexes.
Yeah, I
like-
think I definitely.
And
think
some
there's-
level of intuition of knowing I've got 2, maybe 3 things that can happen here, and maybe at some point it crosses over from noticing there's a certain frame of animation and making a decision on that to it's picked up on your periphery and you just press the right buttons because
Yeah.
you've been
Yeah.
in that situation so many times.
Yeah, it was kind of fun to watch the finals because for anybody who wasn't watching the Ustream on the internet, it's like the guy had to fight his way out of the losers bracket and then win again So they had two best of
Against the
five
guy
series.
who put him in the losers bracket.
Yeah, and it was a best of five series, so it's the same two characters for a bunch of rounds, and it was interesting to see like the fireball spin through the third fireball kind of patterns that emerge.
Mm-hmm.
Just someone who has no idea what's going on. It's like that's the same kind of encounter that happened, and then it plays out slightly differently every time. So, I don't know. So what are you working on these days as an indie developer to move away from Evo? Unless you guys want to talk more about Evo.
I had one question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Just because, there aren't very many game developers aside from maybe a couple FPS people, maybe Blizzard, who get to work on a game and put it out there, but then come see like 3,000 or 4,000 people scream at it for like 2 hours. Like that was like a 2-hour finals bracket, and most of the time was spent going, oh, or for ridiculous. Oh yeah, and like, people like Vega screaming, which I mean, obviously, like these aren't things like you're not responsible for people Vega screaming, but I mean, you played a pretty big part in something that is clearly like means a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's not really a question, I guess. But,
Well,
like how much does that say inform your decision of what to work on next? Like, is the next thing you do, is that a bar that you want to meet? Is something that's going to last for years and is going to entertain thousands of people in the same way?
Sure. I mean, who's going to say no to that, right? But I think it's just about what you can do with what resources you have.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why a really long time ago I thought, I think we really need a new fighting game that takes a maybe a little different approach or targets a different sub niche of the genre or something. And so I've had that in mind for a really long time, but I've just been daunted by how big of a project it is, and that's why I started small or something more manageable, something where I thought like with X amount of money, like you can't make a fighting game, but you can make a really good something small.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
and so I chose card games. So I made 3 different card games now, and they're all simulating a fighting game. They're all simulating the same fighting game. They all have 10 characters in them from this new world called Fantasy Strike that I'm developing.
Mhm.
And so the idea is like laying the foundation for a fighting game. So for a long time I've been working on those card games, and they're basically done now. One of them, like the small, simplest one, is already available, and the other 2 will be shipping like this month and next month. And the other big thing I'm working on is I finally started working on this fighting game. Finally, and
Wow.
So it's still even now I don't really have the resources to do it correctly, but it's just been annoying to have nothing going like for so long. And
For sure.
I've worked just for like years. I've complained like, how come there's no programmers or artists that are willing to do anything and help here? Like, I mean, not like I was offering to pay them, but there's just so many great community efforts I've seen in many genres. That,
Yeah.
like, why can't I do that? Why can't we all do that? And so, I don't know what happened or what's different or something in the last like few months, but somehow people finally said like, yeah, that's right. Why aren't we doing something?
Mm-hmm.
And so now I have a team of musicians working on the music for like every stage, the whole soundtrack of the game. I finally have programmers working on the engine, which will be in Unity, your favorite engine, right? Unity's pretty awesome. And 1 3D artist and 1 2D artist to do poses for the 3D artist. So that that's not enough to make a whole game, but that's like a solid start. And all those people are actively working on it right now.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that.
Anytime you kick off a new prototype, like I want to talk more about card games later because I've been working on one on the side, and it's been this weird, hardcore learning experience about how to think about design completely differently. For us, especially for Andy and I, do lots of small prototypes when we make games. Kyle's made a bunch of different little games. These guys did it professionally for a year. It seems like it's such a big deal to, even if you have it in your head, you have it on paper, even if it's an established genre, to start actually putting pieces together and seeing it in motion can really start to help or inform or highlight places where you thought you had problems. That just seemed like it just sounds like it's great that it's finally it's going to be in a shape that moves and can be played, and you can start to like I don't know. It seems like that will just be awesome.
I don't know if I misunderstood. It's just not what you. So the card games have mechanics that.
Speak up, maybe.
The card games have mechanics on which the fighting game is going to be based. So
Well, I mean, okay, any fighting game, you know that there's some guy who's big and slow and can throw you or something. I mean, that's just a kind of thing you need, someone who can get close. So there's like a character for that, and then he has mechanics in the card game that simulate that. You know, the idea of slow moves, but if he can somehow like get in a good situation, he can do a lot of damage. And then there's somebody who's the opposite, and they're like super fast. They have everything super fast. Like that character in the card games can like draw more cards and play more cards, but each one of them does less.
are you expecting that you're going to get some feedback from more people playing the game now that the game's out? Like it's like basically
Which game?
Well, your card games. Like
I've got tons of feedback for years. A whole group of playtesters. That,
Alright.
Yeah, we've
So you're not expecting that to break at all now that it's in the open. That wasn't your intuitive. Like
Well, it's not quite. I mean, the biggest one of these card games is called Yomi, and that's the one that's not quite out yet in August. But I expect it's going to hold up pretty well because we've had literally years and dozens of tournaments. So you never know. Something could slip through the cracks, but I'm not too worried about it. I actually think it's this statement I'm going to make. It sounds like super bold, but when we think about it a second, you'll go, oh well, yeah, I guess so. So my bold statement is that it's better balanced than any fighting game that's ever been made. And you go, wow, that's bold. But the thing is that there's only a fighting game can be so imbalanced, like it can be, because maybe you just can't get in. Like maybe you're just locked down with fireballs. There's just so many things that can go wrong for a character. But this card game is based on like a rock paper scissors system of guessing, and yeah, there's combos and different payoffs and everything, but there's only so far out of balance the characters could even possibly be. Like, even if I did the worst job, like
I was actually
like they couldn't have 8-2 matches really, where if you played experts played up to 10. Like I just don't think it could ever be that unfair.
What kind of states are you tracking in the card game? Like, is there like your character's in midair? Is it on the ground, or is it more just like hit points and it goes down?
In Yomi, the most meaty of these games, it's just hit points. And
Okay.
Distance is not part of the game.
Yeah, okay.
In the simplest one, actually, distance is part of the game, but there's no hit points. Like you
Okay.
get one hit and you win.
Okay.
It's all about getting that one hit against the right distance.
Okay.
So,
the
tried it both ways.
The interesting aspect there is that you're assuming that the player of the game later on can pull off any of these moves just as easy as playing a card, right?
Yeah, and it's not the F8.
No, that's no. I think that's
bullshit.
cool. I think that's
Yeah.
cool because I can't FADC.
But you'd like to play the FADC card,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. I'd like to FADC by one button and not by pressing two, double tapping, and then letting go of two buttons.
Well, like there's a Dragon Punch card, basically. So, you play Dragon Punch, and if they block, you're like, damn, I used up my Dragon Punch.
So I'm curious how much of the balancing. So the card game that I've been working on started out as like, let's make something like Left 4 Dead, like a co-op, you against the world type of thing into a card game. There's some stuff. There's like Pandemic and Arkham Horror that kind of do that sort of thing. I wanted to try it and do it with just cards, just as a design thing, and almost immediately made like a first rough set, did just one play test with my friend. I was like, oh crap, this is all broken, redid everything. But the thing that has come out the strongest, just as a huge difference from doing computer game design or any kind of traditional video game design at all, is it's almost like you can't use numbers over 5. Like that's just a rule that you have to work around. So in a computer game, you'd be like, oh, well, you'll have 1,000 hit points, and I'll scale everything by these floating point numbers, and I'll have that work this way, and that's going to help modulate, this, this, and this. When you put it down in a card game, like obviously all of that's insane. You can't do any of that stuff, and even simple things like, Magic, you have 20 hit points or something like that. But even then, you have to have beads that like manage that and count that for you. So I'm wondering how much of that would be the thing that I would be most interested in seeing what changes as it goes from card game to an actual playable video game prototype is how much of the sort of the perfect balance you can get with these small numbers, these simpler situations. How does that translate over to something where you actually have to? I feel like as a designer, I have to, when I'm making a video game now, try to exercise the same constraint that I would use designing a paper game, for example. And I don't know how much that figures into your ideas for the fighting game.
I think you had two different ideas there. One of them is about when you work on paper games, things have to be way simpler. You can't have like equations and huge numbers. And then
Right.
another idea is how do you translate like whatever you have to a video game? But that second one is like really easy. I'm almost confused about the question because like, I mean, you have some character that has a bunch of fast stuff and low damage, but you don't literally translate the numbers. You don't like actually use those numbers.
Right.
You just like make a fighting game that has numbers that make sense in that genre. You know,
Right, for
without
sure.
the same
I'm just wondering if the how that'll affect the balance of the thing. If you have something that's perfectly balanced and you're really happy with it, and it's using these simpler numbers or simpler equations, when you put it into a fighting game that's almost
well,
undoubtedly going to use more complex systems.
yeah. So
How do you
none of
maintain
the
the
balance,
balance as it
from
goes?
none of
Oh,
the balance
okay.
from the card game will.
Oh,
be
Just
useful.
the
No,
abstract stuff in terms of this is the like the heavy character and the fast character and like the the sort of the
so it's
chip
going to be a
character.
whole like rebalancing.
Yeah, well, it's two different
experience and
because the
design.
card game is not a literal.
Sure.
It can't. It shouldn't be. It would be a horrible, impossible
Sure.
to play thing. So it's just like a very abstract.
Gotcha.
Like trying to strike at the essence of what we
Right.
guessing games and mind games and saving up for combos. And it's
For
like,
sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get that vibe from it, but it's so abstract from what you would do in a real fighting game that,
Gotcha.
they're just totally different efforts.
Gotcha. Interesting.
I have an abstract question that's probably going to change the topic a bit, but have you thought too much about more than 2-player fighting games? Even sort of like what would it be like to have a four person free for all or 2v2?